Of chaos under heaven, America, China, and the battle for the 21st century. There's some news on that front. If we have some time, we'll talk about that. But let's start with the NATO relationship. Priscilla talked about these cluster munitions that the U.S. has approved, banned by NATO members, the U.K. and France and Italy and Germany and others. Is there any residue of that decision on what we'll watch over the next few days, potentially?
Well, yes, it's no secret, Victor, that some of these European and even NATO countries that President Biden will be interacting with this week were against the U.S. decision to provide cluster munitions to the Ukrainian forces. But I have to tell you, Victor, I've been speaking with Ukrainians about this for many, many months. And what they said is that, hey, we need them. And that, we'll clean them up later if we live that long. Because for the Ukrainians, it's a matter of short-term life and death, not long-term life and death. So I think that the administration made this decision very reluctantly, but I do think it was a decision that will end up saving Ukrainian lives more than costing them, and hopefully costing Russian lives more than saving them. But yes, I think that will be one of the disagreements that they try to brush aside when they all get to Lithuania for this summit, because they want to focus on the good stuff. The good stuff is more weapons to Ukraine, more weapons to the Eastern Front, more unity than less unity, a path to NATO for Ukraine, but not a path that's going to get them there too fast. And then the inclusion of all of these other countries, Australia, New Zealand, South Korea, and Japan. NATO is expanding worldwide, and that's because of China, as you mentioned.
On expansion, since the war started, Finland and Sweden applied. Finland has ascended. There are objections to Sweden. Is progress on those outstanding objections? Is that likely?
I think progress is happening. I don't think it will be fast enough for Sweden to be able to announce that it's making it into NATO this week. I think the Turks are negotiating a very strong hand, and they want some concessions, basically. And one of those concessions is they want the sale of F-16s from the United States, which is being blocked by Congress. That they'll probably get. Another concession is they want Sweden to hand over all the Kurds that they want to prosecute. That they're probably not going to get. So it's going to take a little longer. But meetings like this have a way of sort of speeding things up, but I wouldn't expect any big announcements.
You mentioned Ukraine's membership getting there, but not too fast. The Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg has said that Ukraine will be a member. The question is when. And domestically, Senator Lindsey Graham tweeted that he will be working with colleagues to urge membership. He tweeted this: the best way to prevent future wars and promote peace is to create security guarantees that make aggressor nations think twice before starting wars. There was major pushback to this from the members of the Republican conference there in Congress, pointing out that Article 5 collective defense would mean if they come in before the war is over, then the U.S. is at war with Russia. Is there any appetite beyond Lindsey Graham for admitting Ukraine before the war is over?
Well, sure. I mean, there's appetite in Ukraine,
sure.
First of all. Ukrainians want to join as soon as possible. Also, there are a lot of Europeans on that eastern flank that we were just talking about, the ones that are next to Russia, who are advocating for Ukraine to join NATO before the war ends. But yeah, no, I think it's true, and I think the Biden administration also believes, not just some Republicans, that if they join now, that we would immediately be in a shooting war with Russia, which I don't think the Biden administration is going to sign up for. So I think, Republican divisions over Ukraine aside, it's really Joe Biden who is slowing down the pace while saying that he's speeding it up. And that's sort of the sleight of hand that he's going to have to pull off at the summit. He's going to have to present a plan where he says, oh, we're speeding up their membership, but hey, not so fast, and not right now. And so that's kind of a rhetorical, a game that they're playing. But Zelensky will be there. They'll have something called the NATO-Ukraine Council, which is an upgrade from the NATO-Ukraine Committee. And so there'll be some sort of symbolic signs that NATO and Ukraine are getting closer to membership. But the real important thing right now, I think, is not really whether or not they're a member, it's whether or not they win the war.
Yeah.
And the announcements about giving them weapons and helping them fight are really more important to saving lives on the ground than any membership at this particular moment, in my opinion.
On the expansion of NATO, and really those who are observing, Asian nations, South Pacific nations will be there. And I understand they're watching to see the a commitment to Ukraine, as potentially there could be a need for a commitment to Taiwan if China decides to invade. What will they be looking for?
Right. Well, NATO is engaging with Asian countries, especially Asian allies and partners, really quickly, actually. And it's because, as you said, the threat from China is rising. Now, they're fighting war in Europe right now. They're helping Ukraine try to save its country and its society. That's the most important thing. But we got to walk and chew gum on this thing, Victor. And you can't ignore the future for the present. And I think a lot of the demand signal is coming from the region. So countries like Australia, South Korea, New Zealand, and Japan are not looking to build another NATO. Asia is not Europe. There's not going to be an Asian NATO. But if we get into a war with China, NATO could play some sort of role. So we better start thinking about that.
All right, Josh Rogin, always appreciate the insight. Thanks so much.
Well, on the subject of China, tensions between the U.S. and China may be easing a bit after Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen's high-stakes economic talks in Beijing this weekend. Yellen held about 10 hours of meetings with Chinese officials over the past 2 days and described the talks as direct, substantive, and productive. But she did acknowledge that there are still significant disagreements between the two world powers. CNN's Will Ripley is live in Taipei, Taiwan this morning for us. So, Will, what else did the secretary say about the talks?
Well, basically, she was very, in terms of tone, optimistic that there would